I'm Dave with Hamilton Motor Company. We're here today with a 2016 Lexus NX, and we're going to be installing the Hamilton Motor Company Apple CarPlay Conversion Kit replacement screen. This complete replacement screen is going to add Apple CarPlay and Android Auto to this Lexus NX. We cover almost every model of Lexus and Toyota, so I encourage you to check out our website, hamiltonmotorcompany.com, if you need any Apple CarPlay or Android Auto upgrade kits for your Lexus or Toyota. We'll show you a complete installation in this video, and then as well, we're going to make another video today that you can check out on our YouTube channel that'll give you an overview of how the system works and how to set it up. If you need anything, we have live customer support available in North Carolina. You can give us a call at 919-858-2890. We will begin by using a 12mm socket to remove the negative battery cable and turn power off to the vehicle. To begin, we will remove the leather-covered trim panels on the passenger and driver's side. Start from the end here and just work your way towards the front of the car. Remove the trim panels and set them aside. With the leather-covered trim panels beside the center console removed, reach under this large leather-covered panel, free it loose, including the vent assembly, remove it from the vehicle, and set it aside. The next step is to reach around this trim panel under the start-stop button, pop it loose from the top and bottom, and free it from the vehicle. We now have access to remove this metal look-alike trim around the factory radio. Start to free it from the bottom and work up on both sides. Then grab it from both sides and pop it loose. The whole assembly will come out together. Down on the leather shift boot and unthread the gear shift. Set it aside. Open the glove box, remove this small cover here, and then on this assembly, rock it side to side, free it from the vehicle, and set it somewhere safe. You can then remove this little trim piece, free it from the vehicle, and set it aside somewhere safe. We are now ready to begin removing the center console cover. Lift the center console cover from its tabs on the passenger and driver's side and free it from the vehicle. We can now set it aside. If you did not already set your vehicle to neutral, you can push this switch and move the vehicle now to the neutral position. We are now going to remove 4 screws below the central control unit. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll use a 10mm socket with an extension for these. With the 4 bolts removed, we will now lay a towel over the gear shift to cover it. Remove the 2 10mm bolts on either side of the factory screen, holding it into place. With the 2 bolts on either side of the factory screen removed, free it from its socket and turn it around and disconnect this wire and this black wire. You will need to use a small knife to cut this zip tie connector holding the 2 wires in place. We can now remove the factory screen from the vehicle. Set it somewhere safe. We are now ready to remove the central control unit. Use a sweatshirt or a towel to cover the gear shift to protect your unit from scratches. Start with the top, grip it from either side, and work it back and forth to free it from the vehicle. Disconnect the black wiring harness plugged into the back of it and set it aside. Now, grab the lower unit and slide it out of the vehicle. We now have access to the vehicle wiring. We are now ready to begin wiring the new unit into this vehicle. I'm going to tell you about the 2 versions of Lexus first. As you can see, this version has what's called the knob. It spins around side to side and rocks forward, back, and side to side. For this version, our main wiring harness will have 3 connections that all plug into the back of the factory central control unit here. If your version has what's called the trackpad, then you will have 2 harnesses that connect behind the central control unit, and a 3rd harness will be labeled only for touchpad, and you will run it down behind the cavity and just under here, and you would disconnect the trackpad. You'd plug the Hamilton harness into the trackpad, and you'd plug your original harness into the Hamilton harness. We have a wiring diagram that would show that to you, but that is the only difference between the installation on the trackpad version and the knob version. On the trackpad version, the power connector is much larger. It's almost this big, whereas on the knob version, it's going to be smaller. It'll be about this big, the size of a standard wiring harness. And that power connector would plug into the back of the central control unit. Before we begin wiring, we're going to talk a bit about the wiring. This will make it easier to understand, as you'll know what everything does. This is the primary connector here, and it's going to plug into the back of our new screen. We have this black connector labeled OEM mic, and we have this yellow RCA connector. We'll show you what these are for in just a second. We have 3 connectors down here that are going to plug into the back of your factory central control unit. You will remove a harness one by one from the back of your central control unit. You will plug the Hamilton harness in, and you will plug your factory harness into the Hamilton harness. So for the knob version here, you're going to be making 3 connections behind the vehicle. You also have this one other harness labeled OEM camera, and it's attached to this yellow RCA. The black connector that was plugged into the back of your factory screen is going to plug into this one labeled OEM camera. Finally, you have this one labeled speaker. We include a small speaker with every unit, and a lot of people ask us what this speaker is for. You certainly do not have to install this speaker in the car. What this speaker does is it allows, if you're listening to Sirius XM through your factory XM channel, it allows your Apple CarPlay to mix Apple Maps, Waze, Google Maps, or any other Maps app in with your factory radio. So if you connect this speaker and you're listening to Apple CarPlay, playing Spotify or Apple Music, of course your music will still play through your factory speakers. However, if you want to listen to, say, XM radio through your factory radio, this speaker will allow you to continue to get navigation while you do that. This is a feature that only our systems have. So it would connect like that and install behind your factory radio. You're going to have this other harness as well. We call this the accessory harness, and there's going to be some stuff on it that is not used. This tan connector will plug into the back of your new screen. This USB port will be wired into your glove box or center console. We'll show you how to do that in a minute, but it'll be for an added charging port and then as well for wired CarPlay or Android Auto. Finally, you're going to have a black connector labeled mic, and that will connect to this connector labeled OEM mic. And your OEM microphone signals will run through there. As well, you will have a yellow female RCA labeled camera, and that will plug into the yellow male RCA from our primary harness. The yellow RCA labeled AV in and the one labeled SIM will not be used. As well, the one labeled UART will not be used. If you have a touchpad version with the 360-degree cameras from the factory, we have this extra 360 cable, and we have a 360-degree wiring supplement that'll show you where to connect that. Most folks don't have that option. If your Lexus NX has the touchpad instead of the knob, the process is very similar. It's only slightly different. Once again, this tan connector will go into the back of your new factory screen, and the OEM mic and yellow RCA connectors will plug into our accessory harness. However, your other connectors will look very slightly different. Instead of your power harness being a small harness, it looks like this large harness. You'll disconnect the large harness from the back of your central control unit. You'll plug the Hamilton harness into your central control unit, and you'll plug your factory harness into the Hamilton harness. You will also have this harness labeled HU audio. This will only fit into one socket behind your central control unit. You'll unplug the factory harness, you'll plug in the Hamilton harness, and you'll plug your factory harness into the Hamilton harness. You'll have these two little T's running together. One is labeled only for touchpad and one is labeled only for mouse. Because the NX has either a touchpad or a knob option, the one labeled only for mouse will be permanently taped off, and you will never need to use this one. You would run this one only for touchpad under the touchpad where we showed you it would be instead of the knob. You would disconnect that harness out of your touchpad, plug it into the Hamilton harness, and you'd plug your Hamilton harness into your touchpad. Then your touchpad will work in Apple CarPlay. Finally, you'll have this little male connector and female connector labeled OEM monitor. The black connector from the back of your factory screen would plug into the female side of this one labeled monitor, and the male side would be unused. This small tan wire here with the 360 control wire are typically unused. However, if you have the 360-degree camera option, this would plug into a small metal box we send you, and this gray wire would plug into the gray wire from our accessory harness. With all the wiring explained, let's go put it in the vehicle. To begin, we're going to grab that primary connector we showed you in one hand and the accessory harness in another hand. We're going to take the one labeled OEM mic and we're going to plug it into the black connector labeled mic. As well, we're going to take the one labeled camera, the yellow RCA, and we're going to plug it into the yellow RCA from the primary harness. We recommend you use tape to connect both of these, and that way there, as you're pulling on the wires in the vehicle, nothing comes apart. Now we are going to take the tan connector that we showed you will go into the back of the monitor, as well as this female connector labeled OEM camera. On the knob version, it's labeled OEM camera. On the mouse version, it would be labeled monitor. We will take the one from the accessory harness, the tan primary connector. With these three, we're going to run them up through the center console so they pop out on top. Let's begin. To make sure that when you go to install the central control unit, everything will fit back into place, ensure that all the wires are running behind these cross members. So you want the wires to come out on top and run behind the cross members down and plug into the central control unit here. We like to make it easier for you to see things by showing it out front, but when it comes time to actually install it, you need to make sure the wires run behind everything so that when you put the central control unit back in place, you won't have any wires interfering with it snapping into place. These are the three harnesses you want out on top. These two long tan harnesses will plug into the back of the new screen, and this one other harness on the knob version labeled OEM camera and on the mouse version labeled monitor will plug into the factory black connector. We can go ahead and snap that in. And we have three connections we will make behind the central control unit. On the touchpad version, you would have two connections, power and HU audio. The connection process is the same. You will remove a connector from the factory central control unit, you will plug it into the Hamilton harness, and you will plug the Hamilton harness into the socket where you removed the factory connection. Once again, we have removed a connection from the central control unit. We'll plug it into the Hamilton harness, and the Hamilton harness will plug into the back of the factory unit. Now, all of these connections are like a jigsaw puzzle, and that is they can only go in one way. So you're not going to risk plugging something in the wrong place, and you certainly will not risk damaging anything. So we'll make that third connection on the knob harness here. And just like that, all three have been made behind the factory central control unit. On the knob version, you can see it's 1, 2, 3. On the touchpad version, there would be such a large harness, that's your power harness, it's impossible to miss. And there would be one other harness that would be for your one labeled HU audio. On the touchpad version, that one labeled only for touchpad would be a long T. You would take it, slide it under here, and you would run it under here and connect it into that harness in the bottom of the touchpad. Of course, this one is the knob. With all those harnesses made, we will begin tidying and returning everything to its place. Remove the pink plastic clips from your original screen and install them onto the 2 clip ports of the new screen. With both of the pink clips on your new screen, let's install it into the vehicle. Included is a GPS module, and this is going to be for things like weather apps that need location services. It will plug onto the blue port on the back of the new screen. The magenta port will be unused. The factory square blue wire, this is called the LVDS wire, plugs into the back of the new screen, as well as the 2 tan connectors from your Hamilton harness. The 2 tan connectors are both plugged into the back of the Hamilton screen, as well as that original blue LVDS and the GPS antenna. We can now install the screen into its socket. Route the USB under this lower cross member. With the wiring all out of the way, we can stick the central control unit back into its socket and snap it in place. You have a few options of where to route the USB. You can route it through and drill a small hole and put it in your glove box. Some people also like to stick it out by their steering wheel. You can also order very inexpensive extensions if you want to run it to your center console or into your glove box. This customer requested us to stick it out on the side here, so that's what we will do. We will stick it out between the passenger seat and the center console. Go ahead and reconnect the small black connector for your climate control and clock assembly. Now line up the plastic connectors and snap it into place. Now time to reinstall the center console cover. Line the gear shift up through the shift boot and then arrange the center console cover into its original tabs, making sure that no wiring is in the way. And click all of the tabs back into place. Reinstall these 2 rear trim pieces. You need to clip this one into this piece first, and then they will install together. Snap the clips into place. We are now going to remove 2 screws on either side of the trim piece on the metal look-alike trim. We will then switch out the center trim for the Hamilton Motor Company trim piece. We will install these 2 small clips from the Hamilton Motor Company kit. Be aware they're labeled R and L for right and left. We are going to move these 1, 2, 3 red clips. We used a credit card to remove these clips, and we will now insert them onto the new piece. And with that, we're ready to install the trim. It's moved to the trim piece. We can go ahead and position it into place. Now you do need to install this trim piece before the new screen will fit back into its place. You can leave it unsnapped at the bottom, but go ahead and snap it in up top. Now, line up the 2 brackets and go ahead and click the factory screen into its clips. We will now use 2 of the golden screws from Hamilton Motor Company to install the screen. The factory screws we no longer have clearance to use as the new screen is larger. So we will use these screws. Now with the screen snapped into place, we can use a screwdriver to tighten these screws down. We're using a screwdriver with a socket extension. You could either use this or a handheld screwdriver would work just fine. And with that, the screen is secured into place. This trim piece needs to grab the upper lip of the air vents and slide into place. Now line up the passenger leather covered trim piece in the vent assembly and snap it into place. We will now reinstall this piece of trim underneath the start-stop button. Next, we will reinstall the leather-covered trim pieces on either side of the center console. This customer requested that this wired USB port be between the passenger seat and center console. This wired USB port is for Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in the wired mode. All of our systems come built in with wireless and wired Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. You don't need to install this USB port at all. A lot of folks will stick it in the glove box. You can also run it into one of the center console compartments. Finally, we'll reinstall the trim on the driver's side and the gear shift knob. And that concludes our installation in the 2016 Lexus NX. We'll have another video on our YouTube channel that gives you an overview of the kit and what it looks like in use. Of course, if you run into any questions while doing the install, you can give our team a call at 919-858-2890. You can also email us, support@hamiltonmotorcompany.com. And finally, we have a support forum available on our website for 24/7 support.